I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. It's a new dream team that aims to help the poverty-stricken both here and abroad.
CRS had the good fortune to develop this program and then looked around for universities that already had done a fair amount of work in preparing faculty to integrate Catholic social thought into their classes.
Plus, after the dust has settled, a look back at Cuba with Bishop DiMarzio.
The message was gotten across very clearly, very nicely. We see that there were tremendous crowds.
And meeting this deadline can be taxing, but there is help available.
So I see a lot of people come back once they do their taxes. They come back and give us the results, and everybody seems to be happy.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. According to one report, more than 1.5 billion people in the world are living in poverty. In the U.S. alone, the poverty rate was more than 15% in 2010, the highest in almost 80 years. That's nothing compared to other parts of the world. Take Africa as one example, where recent data shows more than 40% of the population living below the poverty line. Many people are working to turn those numbers around, though, including Catholic Relief Services, the official international humanitarian agency of the Church in the U.S. They unveiled a new collaboration with a Catholic university here in the city. Catholic Relief Services and St. John's University announced a partnership aimed at helping the less fortunate overseas. Today at St. John's, the school and CRS made the partnership official.
My dear all, today we are indeed celebrating an historical moment, the beginning of a marriage, the beginning of a journey, the beginning of a mandate.
Two strong organizations committed to Catholic social thought have formally pledged to work together to see if we can't find new and creative ways to relieve situations of poverty and oppression around the world. And we can do it in a way that develops ourselves. This program brings together in a very unique way the expertise and the experiences of the human service provider world with those of the academic community.
We both bring things that are very complementary. Catholic Relief Services brings immediate experience in the field, trying to address the problems that face people who are suffering from poverty and violence around the world. And St. John's brings the expertise of its academics and the passion of its students to address some of those issues and bring their best thinking and the kind of latest expertise to those issues. And together we can make a real difference.
CRS had the good fortune to develop this program and then looked around for universities that already had done a fair amount of work in preparing faculty to integrate Catholic social thought into their classes.
The heart of what St. Vincent de Paul tried to do in his life is he tried to build a bridge between the life of the institution of the church and institutions and the life of the poor. That's essentially what we celebrate today.
A Catholic university is most itself when it's involved in programs such as this. It can't be closed in on itself. It cannot be closed in just on its own local community.
The university is a university, and therefore knowledge and truth are what it should be concerned about. So the knowledge is that we have a lot of serious suffering around the world. And the truth is we have to do something about it.
Catholic Relief Services has had a great interest in working with Catholic colleges and universities for quite a while, and we do work with schools all over the country. This particular project came out of some of that experience, and there were people who were involved in it both on the side of some colleges and on CRS's side who identified the need to have this kind of program that would really focus faculty on campuses on the greatest needs around the world and bring their expertise.
From our side, we need the direct provider to tell us, is this working? We have been developing a cadre of faculty here who really are fully knowledgeable about and committed to Catholic social thought. And this program is based on Catholic social thought. So they knew that we had a ready staff to join them.
And they have incredible experience addressing these issues, and it's at the heart of their mission. So it was a very appropriate match.
what's also important is it enhances us as a university. It makes us better, and it really helps us to almost create a laboratory for mission. And I think that's the wonderful gift of this partnership.
And we, of course, wish them all the best as they move forward with this very important work. Ahead on Currents, a couple of key endorsements for Mitt Romney. That and the rest of the day's headlines coming up next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faubles. Mitt Romney has received the support of another pro-life organization. The Susan B. Anthony List, which aims to get pro-life candidates elected, has endorsed Romney. In a statement, the organization's president, Marjorie Dannenfelser, says it's time to rally around the former Massachusetts governor. Dannenfelser also referred to President Obama as, quote, the most ideologically pro-abortion president in the nation's history. She says the Susan B. Anthony List plans on spending between $10 and $12 million in battleground states. Yesterday, Romney also received the endorsement of National Right to Life, whose president noted the uniformity of this year's GOP candidates on the issue of abortion.
We are extremely gratified that every candidate running for the Republican nomination took a pro-life position and kept the life issues at the forefront of this race. We look forward to Mitt Romney's election as our next pro-life president on November 6th.
And the National Right to Life has affiliates in all 50 states and more than 3,000 local chapters. The American Civil Liberties and the NAACP say they will challenge a new voter identification law in Pennsylvania. The law requires anyone wishing to vote to have a photo ID. The Philadelphia Inquirer reports the ACLU and NAACP will sue on grounds that the law is discriminatory, specifically toward the elderly, the poor, urban residents, and the disabled. Now, the paper also reports that 2 legislators in the state will also introduce a measure to have the law overturned. According to Religion News Service, Pennsylvanians can opt for a non-photo ID for religious reasons, but must answer a series of questions about their religion. Questions include how the person came to the religion and how many members the religion has. Well, today may be the Friday of Easter week for many Christians around the world, but Orthodox Christians are observing their Good Friday. Orthodox Christians who follow the Julian calendar rather than the Gregorian calendar used by Catholics and Protestants march through Jerusalem's Old City. According to the Associated Press, pilgrims from countries including Cyprus, Greece, Serbia, Russia, the Ukraine, and Egypt are in the Holy Land for their observances. Christians are being brought to trial just for being Christian. That is how Jason DiMarzio, director of the Present Truth Ministries advocacy group, describes a case involving 12 Christians who stood trial Easter Sunday in Iran. The group is being charged with apostasy or abandoning their religion, in this case, Islam. While the Iranian constitution does grant protection to religious minorities born into faiths other than Islam, there have been reports of a surge in government retaliation coinciding with a growing popularity in conversions Christianity. The attorney that is for the group is no stranger to these kinds of cases. Muhammad Ali Dadka also represents an Iranian Christian pastor charged with apostasy. He's been sentenced to death for leaving Islam and converting to Christianity. Presently, there are more than 100,000 evangelical Christians in Iran, according to conservative estimates. In other news, a nun in Spain is refusing to testify in a case involving the alleged abduction of 1,500 newborns over a 4-decade period. 87-year-old Sister Maria Gomez Valbuena is accused of taking part in the abduction of hundreds of babies who were then sold for adoption. According to reports, many of the alleged cases involve the Catholic Church in some way. A nationwide campaign is currently underway to help parents find their abducted children, including the use of DNA testing. And as we know, the campaign trail is full of challenges and sacrifice. Well, for one Italian priest running for public office, it has cost him his ministry, at least for now. Father Vincenzo Chiodi has been suspended from his ministry after announcing his candidacy for the city council in Molise against his bishop's orders. Chiodi has no plans to withdraw from the race despite the diocesan action. He says he will pursue his political aspirations because, quote, the Lord is calling me. According to church law, priests are, quote, forbidden from running for public offices that entail the exercise of civil power. Italian media has unearthed an old interview with Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict, in which he says he would prefer an Italian pope to one from another country. Cardinal Ratzinger, who was at that time the Archbishop of Munich, gave the interview in 1978, just before the death of Pope Paul VI. He pointed out that the Pope is the Bishop of Rome and that it was important to stress the local dimension of the papacy. He also said that considering a nationalist sentiment throughout much of the world, the most neutral thing would be to maintain tradition and elect an Italian pope. Only months later, he took part in the conclave that elected John Paul II, the first non-Italian pope since the 1500s. 26 years later, Cardinal Ratzinger, a native of Germany, became the second straight non-Italian elected to the papacy. And it was a quick vacation for Pope Benedict. Rome Reports has more on that.
After taking a few days off in Castel Gandolfo, the Pope is now back at the Vatican. He boarded a helicopter and arrived back home on Friday. The Pope actually decided to shorten his vacation to see his 88-year-old brother Georg at the Vatican. Benedict XVI was scheduled to come back on Sunday, but his brother, who lives in Germany, was planning on visiting Rome during that same time. Rather than have him stay at Castel Gandolfo, the Pope decided to go back to the Vatican to make his brother feel more comfortable. These last few weeks have been quite busy for Benedict XVI. He only had a couple of days to recuperate from his apostolic trip to Mexico and Cuba before leading all the ceremonies of Holy Week. Shortly after giving the Urbi et Orbi blessing on Easter Sunday, the Pope took a short vacation at his summer residence of Castel Gandolfo. But even through his vacation, the Pope was still working. On Wednesday, he took a helicopter from Castel Gandolfo to the Vatican to preside over his weekly general audience in St. Peter's Square.
A group of prominent Germans is sharing its views of the man who is Pope Benedict. A new book about the Holy Father includes contributions from a wide range of people, including Cardinals Kurt Koch and Joachim Meisner. Contributors also include an Olympic skier and a former soccer star. A copy of the book was presented to Pope Benedict this week. There's no word on whether the book will be published in any other languages. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. A view of Cuba through the eyes of Brooklyn's bishop.
Same old cars are there. Some new ones have been added, a lot more new ones than old ones. But it's basically the freedoms that people don't have are still the same.
Welcome back. 2 weeks ago, Pope Benedict made a historic visit to the island nation of Cuba. He was greeted by thousands of Cubans at masses in Santiago de Cuba and Havana. During his time there, Pope Benedict met with the country's current president, Raul Castro. He also squeezed in a meeting with Castro's brother, the man who for many years ruled Cuba, former President Fidel Castro. A delegation of Americans also paid a visit to the country to coincide with the Pope's visit, including 2 bishops from the Brooklyn Diocese, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio and Auxiliary Bishop Octavio Cisneros, who is a native of Cuba. Our news director, Ed Wilkinson, recently sat down with Bishop DiMarzio for a look back at the Cuban trip and a look ahead for what the future may hold for the island nation. Here now is this week's Into the Deep.
Bishop, thanks for being with us again.
Always good to be with you.
It's been a couple of weeks now since the Holy Father's trip to Mexico and to Cuba, and of course you were along on the Cuban leg of the journey. What was your overall impression of the impact of the papal journey?
Well, again, it's going to be hard to tell until later, but I think there was an impact. The message of the Holy Father was a clear one, asking for more freedom for the Church to fulfill its mission. It seems like obviously the Cuban government was open to listening to that message, perhaps for their own means and ends, but the message was gotten across very clearly, very nicely. We see that there were tremendous crowds. People say, well, they were forced to come. Well, who knows if they were forced to come or not, if they were there freely. They certainly were enthusiastic when all was said and done.
Yeah, and along the routes of the motorcades, there was a lot of people seemed to turn out to see the Holy Father.
Definitely, and it was an event. I mean, not that much happens in Cuba, so this was an event in every way. As it was a national event, and everything was shut down for those days.
Yeah, at times it seemed almost as if the Pope and the President were talking past each other. I mean, they both had their points they wanted to make, and maybe not quite listening to each other. They were just going to go ahead and make those points, which, I mean, I guess that's the way diplomacy works.
Well, I guess it was. I think the dialogue was prepared. If there was any other dialogue, we don't know, but what we did see was something that was prepared, making the points they wanted to make. And so it's hard to tell on that point of view if there was any movement along. We know that Fidel made an effort to come to see the Pope at the Nunciatura after the Mass in Havana, which is a positive thing. Some will probably be criticized for him receiving him, but again, it was his effort to let the Pope come the first time when John Paul went, so there was something to it. And again, we are called as Christians to love everybody, and hatred or shunning people is not the way we should operate. We've got to engage people, no matter who they are.
Yeah. Of course, you've been to Cuba a couple of times. This, I think, was your third trip.
Actually, the fourth
trip.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense of is life changing in Cuba at all, or what is it? What
Well,
is the standard of living there?
There are changes. It's slow. The same old cars are there. Some new ones have been added, a lot more new ones than old ones. But it's basically the freedoms that people don't have are still the same. Still a very restrictive atmosphere. They're trying to open up the economic freedom that people can have little businesses, very much controlled by the state. But it's not economic freedom that's really the issue. It is the spiritual freedom, the freedom to live in a democratic society where people can voice their opinion. We know there was one unfortunate incident in Santiago where a man from the crowd shouted out, down with dictatorship and freedom for democracy, and he was quickly ushered out and beat up at that time. So we know that there's no dissent is tolerated. Right. The women in white, we know, is another issue. So these are the women that, again, are quietly protesting, you know, in a peaceful way, what they believe to be a lack of freedom. Some of them have men that have been incarcerated for a long time. They're looking for their freedom. So, again, it's a very repressive, socialistic society that isn't open to democratic reform.
Yeah, and the Pope made that point. He said the church has a lot it can contribute to society, but it can't do it unless it has some freedom to move.
Right. The church can operate in any society, you know. There's no one form of government. But again, when there's no freedom, that's not government, that's repression. So I think this is where the church is looking for just the freedom to be able to continue its mission, to evangelize, to preach the gospel without being hindered and impeded.
And you were traveling with a group from Miami, many of them Cuban Americans who maybe have not been back there for
Some of them have not been back since they left 50 years ago. Some basically after John Paul I visit kind of got converted. Some of them were against even going to Cuba. You know, they're really that much restricting themselves from even going back. But after they saw the impact of John Paul II's visit, now they came back and turned around and were on the pilgrimage themselves. So that was very interesting.
So some progress is being made, you feel, though?
I think with the Cuban American people, they see things differently. They realize that maybe the embargo isn't the right thing to do. Yeah. The people are suffering, not the government as much. So it's the politics of engaging Cuba are hard to come by, difficult to define. But again, my feeling is that the more we engage, the more freedom is going to happen. Sure. The very fact that they restrict the internet and any communication shows you that they're afraid of outside influence, that people will know what's happening outside. The more that we have people knowing what's happening outside, exchange students, all kinds of things that'll show the Cuban people what freedom is about, the better chance we have of having good internal change in Cuba.
Well, certainly a historic moment, and we were happy to bring it to our viewers here at the net.
I'm glad you covered it.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Okay.
And keep it here. There's more currents ahead. Tax day is almost here, but there's help to get you across the finish line.
And we have 6 professional tax preparers and 6 accounting students who have passed and been certified by the IRS, passed their beginning certification.
Finally tonight, tax day right around the corner. Have you done all your filings? Well, according to one number, more than 10 million people filed their taxes with extensions in 2010. Now, if you don't want to be in that category this year, help is available. Our Nicole Dessou has the story of a local organization that's lending a big hand as the deadline approaches.
St. John's Bread and Life noticed a void in the community and decided to fill it. So besides food assistance, they've added free tax assistance to the menu.
I'm actually helping people fill out the intake to do their taxes today. And if they want to apply for benefits such as food stamps or Medicaid, I assist them with that also.
Folks are coming to food pantries and soup kitchens like ours because they're spending their money on rent and not having enough money left over.
Which makes this program more of a value for families and individuals who can't pay the high fees of a traditional tax prep service. Running now for over 5 years, St. John's Bread and Life saves clients money and encourages them to use their returns wisely.
One of the things we do is when folks get maybe getting a large sum, encourage them to put it in some type of savings. This ties in with our overall mission, which is not just giving to those in need, but it was really trying to address either reduce the poverty levels in our community and or maintain the safety net so people don't fall further.
IRS-trained volunteers give personalized service to each client, asking detailed questions to get the filings done right. Some volunteers can even vouch for the service because they've been on the client side of the table before.
Actually, yes, I've had my taxes done by this program. They did a really good job.
I came in to volunteer, wanted to utilize my spare time appropriately, give back to the community. And, the day that I came, they happened to be looking for a bilingual male case manager, and I ended up inquiring, and I ended up getting hired. So that's pretty much like my testimony, how I came involved with St. John's Bread and Life. It's being the attitude of gratitude, being grateful. I always go beyond the call of duty. So, it helped me. The agency have helped me in many ways. Of course, the community, we've helped them, but definitely this agency have helped me a tremendous ways.
Getting your taxes done at St. John's Bread and Life isn't just about filing and getting a return. They have the community's best interest at heart and want to build long-lasting relationships with repeat clients.
We have clients that come ongoing every year. They come here because they're comfortable, the privacy, and also because we have a full line of case managers where we help them with other needed services. At times people come here and do their taxes, and they can do a little more than that. They can do their taxes, they can recertify, for instance, for their health insurance, their food stamps, and so forth.
So I see a lot of people come back. Once they do their taxes, they come back and give us the results, and everybody seems to be happier.
And if there is a service St. John's Bread and Life doesn't offer, they can still help.
A lot of the staff here, we are just so highly resourced. We know where to go for a particular service if we can't do it here.
And putting clients and their needs first has paid off for these volunteers with invaluable lessons about compassion and love.
I like to help people. I like to see people do good, even though they don't have much, but they still live their life to the fullest and be happy.
For you last-minute filers out there, if you make between $18,000 to $20,000 as a single person or $50,000 to $55,000 as a family, you can still take advantage of St. John's Bread and Life Tax Assistance Service. But not for long. This year's tax filing deadline is April 17th.
So the good news is there's still time to file, but you're cutting it close. Thanks to Nicole for that report. And that is all for this edition of Currents. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. We are also on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublis. Thank you for watching and have a good night.